Hello and welcome to the Smart Money Simplified podcast hosted by Brent Mekosh. Brent, good to be with you again. How are you?
Doing well, and I'm excited for our guest today. Here in Arizona, I think acutely, and it might be this way for listeners that we have around the country. There's just not a lot of houses for sale, and typically on my ride to work, you drive through my neighborhood. You're going to see several for sale signs over the course of year of year. Let's start over again. I don't like that. Editor keeps canceling. Start over again.
I'm gonna stumble over my words probably 100 times. So
Man, I don't know why I had nothing to drink last night. I'm just freaking dragging.
usually Brent is like the model of like
Mm.
smooth.
I
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
All right.
Smart
He
water.
is smooth. All
Editing
right.
team, scrap all that.
I'll scrap it all. It never happened. And I'm going to start it again 1 minute into the recording, starting right about now. And welcome to the Smart Money Simplified podcast hosted by Brent Mekosh. Brent, good to be with you again. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing really well, and I think here in Arizona we're very fortunate because we're not dealing with some of the stuff that you're dealing with around the country. I know, Bill, you've had some really brutal winter weather. We haven't had any of that. Our friends over in California, I think that's been the big news story that we've seen, and just the devastation and the wildfires that we've had to our west. And it's a very sort of, I guess, rough segue into what we're going to talk about today, because I do think it has an impact, at least on what the real estate market's looking like here in Arizona. And I think that it's just starting, as my own humble opinion on that. Because as people get the insurance claims settled out where they're able to, and they consider to think about the quality of life and everything else that they have. I don't like to set that all either, Bill. We're starting over again. I've never done this before. I've never not been able to start twice.
You know what
Cancel
it
all that.
is? You're
What?
nervous. See, everybody else you have on this show doesn't know who the hell you are. Okay. Now you have your
Well,
neighbor from across the
he's
alley.
done it in
Now you
front of
have
me
your neighbor from
before.
across the alley. And it's like now you're all like discombobulated and everything
No, I'm
else.
fucking tired is what it is. I have not been able to wake up. I was zonked. All right, this is it.
The weather.
Whatever we get here, we're taking it.
All right.
All right.
We'll do this again right about, I'll give you like five. Hello, and welcome to the Smart Money Simplified podcast, hosted by Brent Mekosh. Brent, good to be with you. How are you?
Bill, it's always good to be with you, and I'm doing really well. And I'm excited about today's conversation because it's one that I'm thinking about personally also. I mean, typically in my neighborhood in Phoenix, when I leave in the morning and I'm driving to my office, you're passing several for sale signs. At least you used to be up until the last couple years. And what we've noticed here in Arizona, and I think to a broad extent around the country, is just a huge demand for real estate, despite what has happened with interest rates. Interest rates have risen. It's made housing less affordable to a lot of people, but it hasn't really impacted prices yet. Prices have not come down. And in our market, at least out here, there's just very, very little for sale. There's not a lot out there to buy. And so I've got a really good friend of mine and also a fantastic realtor. I've got Caroline Van Arsdale. She joined Silverleaf Realty in 2021, and that was after about 15 years or so of experience in high-end real estate and doing a number of things in that industry. And I got a lot of stuff I want to talk to you today about, Caroline, but just give me kind of a real quick overview. Like what are you seeing in the market? And we just wrapped up 2022. And what did the numbers look like prior compared to other years?
Well, I want to start out, Brent, by saying that there is a for sale sign just up the street from you. I have a listing.
Yeah, that's that's true. Yeah, I know
Uh,
you have several listings. You do.
and it might be out of the price range that you're looking, but um, I our numbers are looking. We're expecting a really robust 2025. Some economists are thinking it might be similar to 2021. Um, Interest rates are kind of going down a bit, little by little. Uh, and we're just in Phoenix specifically, we're expecting there's a lot more building going on. We are currently seeing a bit more come on the market just in this first month of the year. And we're excited about 2025. The end of last year was a little slow after the election. I'm sorry, before the election. And right after the election, we started hearing the phone ring. So we're excited about the year.
Well, I think the market that you're working in, we're working in the extremely high end market. So we're
Right.
talking 5, 10, 15, $20 million houses is what you're selling. And I think for that buyer, and I want to talk about two things. I want to talk about specifically that buyer because that's the buyer that you're working with in during most of your day. And then I want to talk about everybody else because I think that's a very different it's a different buyer, it's a different market. But obviously we're seeing a downtick a little bit here in interest rates, which is a pleasant surprise. Obviously, if you're looking to buy a house and you've got to finance a portion of it, but a lot of your buyers really aren't. They're just paying cash for their houses, and so the interest rates, it really doesn't matter to them. Um, is that what you're seeing? Is there still that demand with the cash buyer at again that multi-million-dollar price point to come in and just pay whatever the market is asking, or are they being a little bit more cautious and maybe taking a step back with that?
Um, we still have a lot of cash buyers. We have more buyers than we have inventory. So I would say the luxury market, we're still slow on inventory. In the lower non-luxury market, the inventory is ticking up. Um, but even though interest rates don't really affect this luxury buyer as much, or seller, it still does play a role, I think. Once you see just more inventory come on in general, I think that's going to affect some of the luxury market as well. It just kind of gets the clock moving for people. But with the interest rates going down and continuing to going down, we are seeing kind of a standstill. At least we were at the end of the fourth quarter last year. Nothing was really happening. Interest rates are going down. Why aren't more people putting their houses on the market? Why aren't we seeing some movement? And it's mainly because they're continuing to go down. And people are just waiting. Well, if it's going to continue to go down, I'll wait until it goes further down. So once you see, I think historically, once you see sort of a standstill in the decreasing interest rates, then we don't see a lot of movement in the market.
Now, in that luxury buyer, if you're talking again the 5, 10, $15 million homes, what percentage of those buyers are cash buyers versus financing a portion of it?
I mean, we see almost all cash.
Yeah, so it's just people coming in with a pile of cash and saying, "I want this
Well,
house,"
and
and
especially
whatever
when
it
you
takes.
have so many with a pile of cash, it's when that's what's appealing to the seller. So you
Right.
can come in and finance, but if somebody comes in with cash, around the same time, then uh, that's what they're going to go with.
I've always thought that I moved here to Arizona in 2007, and it was just at the peak of the last, obviously, housing bubble when we had 2008 to 12, 13, were a rough time for real estate here in the valley. But I thought that when I moved here, the economic drivers in this state were real estate, it was tourism, and it was retail. And now I would say the Great Recession was one of the best things that happened to Arizona because we've got this massively broadly diversified economy where you have everything from building Lucid to the Taiwan semiconductor plant that's happening in the North Valley, and you have people coming in with an enormous amount of wealth and earnings power. Are you seeing in the luxury market the buyers that are coming in? Are they coming in because they're actually resettling their life here, or are they coming in for the second house? Because 15 years ago it was the second house. I don't feel like that's the case anymore.
Not as much anymore. I mean, a lot of it in the luxury market is still a second home, but a lot of them are moving here. You get a lot of people. I mean, we have a lot of economic opportunity here now. The job growth is great here, so people are all moving here for their jobs. Or if they could work remotely, they're moving here and working remotely now because that became really popular during COVID. Um, and especially, from states that have higher taxes like California, they save a lot by living here and working out of their home here. So.
In that luxury market, where are you seeing most of the people coming in from?
Um, a lot from California, Chicago, New York. Have some people from Seattle, even some people from Florida now with some of the hurricanes and things that have happened over there. Um, Insurance rates, people not being able to get home insurance on their homes in Florida or California.
Well, you bring that up in terms of the natural disasters, and obviously what we've been looking at here for the last month or so is just these absolutely devastating wildfires in Southern California,
Yeah.
and it's hit some really really pricey real estate. Have you seen people now from California that might have typically moved for not necessarily in mass. They did it individually for their own business or economic reasons, but now they've got this as a major catalyst saying, you know what, I've had it. I've had it with the state, not just from a stifling regulatory and economic situation that they've unfortunately created in California, but also just, I don't want to do this anymore. You know,
Yeah.
are you getting calls from people in California?
Yeah, I think we did get some calls from people in California. I know school applications around us were up. One of the schools had 15 new applicants from California. My son's school recently got a new student. And that's a quick move. So my guess is maybe they had family in this area and they made a quick decision.
Right.
We had some others that came and looked, and they're just still in a state of shock and still
Right.
distraught. I think most of the people that were making quick moves were people with children and trying to figure out where they want to get their child into school quickly. Um, some of them may make the final decision in the coming months, but they wanted to just kind of get their kid in somewhere. Maybe they had a second home somewhere else, so they're hunkering down there for now before they make their decision on where they're gonna kind of set their grounds.
I mean, yeah, I think there's going to be, I think we're going to see a lot more of that, but I think there's going to be a lag with it. I mean, I've heard the permitting just to clear your lots in LA now can be up to 18 months. And so you've
Yeah,
got everything that you own disintegrated and basically in a pile of charred rubble. And the city is telling you can't get in there for a year and a half to be able to even clean it. So
yeah.
to your point, I think there's probably an enormous amount of shock there. But when you do start seeing some of the insurance companies, at least that didn't exit that state, start paying out, now people are going to have, a couple incentives because there'll be a little bit of cash in their pockets as well. And I don't know, I just have the sense that we're going to see quite a bit coming in the aftermath of this.
Yes, and there's a housing shortage there. So you, if you still have your home standing, you can sell it for quite a bit of money over there still, apparently. So because they need housing. Um, so I had one buyer come in and their house was still standing, but they, wanted to make a change.
Yeah, they had it.
Thought they could get a decent amount for their house over there, so they started looking over here. But again, just kind of still so distraught to make those final decisions. So they kind of have slowed down a little bit, I think, trying to think through it. But
Now, here's a question that I have for you is you mentioned obviously the natural disasters, not we just spoke obviously about California, but also in Florida. Do we have any of those same issues, at least here in the Valley, getting our homes insured? Because I've not heard of that here locally. I mean, obviously, you start getting up in Prescott and you get in the Flag and you get into areas where there's a significant fire risk up there just because of the trees and the load that you've got. That's a little bit different. But here in the Valley, have you've ever heard of insurability
no,
problems?
I've not heard of that. And I know a lot of communities, one of the communities that we work in quite a bit, Silverleaf and DC Ranch, they've recently put out more information about what they do to help prevent fires. Um, I- yeah, I've not heard of any issues with insurance here. I know that we, as a city, we take it seriously and do a lot to prevent those things.
Yeah, I think the state has also at least been fairly proactive with that as well. I know in California, I think it was, and the listeners can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was Prop 103 was late 1980s, and what that established in California was an insurance commission that had to approve any rate increases, and they were very kind of slow to do that. So what you had is you had a number of insurance carriers that were watching the fire risk specifically increase and increase and increase, and you had a lot of regulatory burdens that were put in the place of landowners in just terms of clearing the undergrowth in their property. They
Right,
weren't allowed to do that. And the
right.
carriers just said, hey, that this risk is not worth it for us anymore because the state won't allow us to charge the rates that we need to properly mitigate this. And I think Arizona has been a lot more, I'd say probably friendly to the free market in terms of determining what those
Yeah.
insurance rates really should be. Okay.
Yeah, and we're doing things as a state to prevent those things from happening. Clearing out the brush, a lot of restrictions in place. So I don't think it's been as high of a risk here.
So what are some of the other trends that you're seeing aside from just people relocating in the luxury real estate market here in Arizona?
Well, I do have a report here from Phoenix Business Journal last year, end of last year, that Phoenix was in the top 10, according to the National Association of Realtors, of hotspots for 2025. And we are the only metro area in the Western United States in this list. So I think with COVID, we saw a lot of people moving out of the metropolitan areas and into, still cities, but smaller, Charlotte, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Indianapolis, Kansas City are some of them. And, but Phoenix is still one of the only ones in the metropolitan areas in the West.
Who are we sharing that list with? Who else is on the list?
Let's see, this is in alphabetical order, so it's not necessarily in order of the top to bottom. Boston, Charlotte, Grand Rapids, Greenville, South Carolina, Hartford, Connecticut, Indianapolis, Kansas City, Knoxville, Tennessee, Phoenix, and San Antonio.
Interesting. That's interesting. A lot of names there I wouldn't have thought of.
Right. Has to do, I think, with just building opportunity. So we just have a strong market here. We have a strong economy, lots of jobs, like you said, moving here. The weather helps. It's easy location.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's well, obviously I love it here. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. Definitely a great place to live. Now, industry wide, now let's move a little bit away from just the luxury market. But in May of last year, there was a big lawsuit that got settled with the National Association of Realtors. You want to talk a little bit about that and how that has impacted your business?
Yeah, so it hasn't necessarily impacted our business. It's just changed things a little bit. It's a lot more conversation to be had with buyers and sellers, and we in our market have always done that. Sometimes it's just, I think what it all started with is kind of price fixing and saying it's 3% to this side and 3% to that side, and that's never been the case. And we have, unfortunately, sometimes that was communicated that way through agents and brokerages. But what we have now are new buyer broker agreements. So anytime you show a buyer a property, you need to have an agreement in place that this is what you charge to be their agent. To show them a property, you need 2%, 2.5%, 3%, whatever your commission that you want to earn, and you set an agreement with them. You negotiate with your buyer. And then sellers, and it's changed a couple of times now. We're starting on February 1st getting some new forms where sellers don't have to say what they're going to offer a buyer's agent. They can just say whether or not they plan to offer something and not what it is. And it's all kind of based off the offer now. So if you can bring a buyer that's going to submit a great offer, closer to full price, great terms, then that seller's gonna be more willing to pay you a fee that you want. But if it's not a great offer, then they might say, well, now I'm only gonna give the buyer's agent 2%. So it's all negotiated in the contract now. It's just a different way than what a lot of agents have done in the past. What any agent has done in the past, really, but it's just creating a lot more of those conversations, and it's actually, you're working more for your compensation.
Now, in the past, and again, the old regime, I guess, pre-settlement was, I mean, typically it was always the seller that paid all those sales costs, correct?
Yes.
At least the commissions to the brokers. So let's say it was 5 or 6%, and sort of what you really wanted in terms of to get that listing is if you could get both sides of that transaction, you were a real happy camper. If you could get the seller's listing and also bring your buyer, then obviously you were able to get both sides of that. Now what you're telling me is that the buyer, it's almost completely flipped, where the buyer is determining what percentage they are willing to pay their buyer's realtor, and the seller really is under no responsibility to pay anything.
They're not. So if I have an agreement with my buyer that I want 2.5%, and the seller says that the house that they want, the seller says I'm only going to pay 2%.
What if they say nothing?
Then the buyer is technically on the hook for paying me 0.5%, which is really, that's going to be tough for young buyers, first-time home buyers. The buyers they're already struggling, right, with these interest rates and to come up with the money for the rising housing costs. And I mean, you can, as an agent, you can agree with your buyer, okay, I want to get this deal done. You're not going to owe me the 0.5%, but we do have a contract in place. It's
Where
just
is the
kind of an odd, it's just a different, it's a change to it, but if you can really work hard for your buyer and you can negotiate the process with the seller's agent, then you should be able to get that compensation that you're asking.
where is the incentive structure now, though, to go and get the seller listing?
Well, then you know exactly what you're getting, right? And sellers, when you're a listing agent, you do a lot for those sellers. You do all the photography, all the signs, open houses, all those things. So you are working a lot more on that side, a lot of times. But buyers, sometimes you'll drive them around for a year looking at houses, and you do a lot of work for them too. So it's really just kind of making the compensation that an agent is working for more apparent, which
Okay.
is
Okay. So,
it's kind of a great thing too. So it shouldn't have been, what was happening before is the commissions were being posted on MLS. It's always been that way. And the thought process was that some agents, buyer agents, would only take their clients to the ones with the higher commissions posted. Um, so, which should never happen.
okay. But now though, if you're acting as a seller's agent, you get a listing. The seller is not. You can contractually determine what that cost is going to be to sell this house.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Got it.
And we'll tell them this is what we provide. This is all the marketing we do. So this is what we charge. And, it does make the sellers think a lot more about their net number, what they want to walk away with. So if you can sell my house for this much more and we can offer the other side this, then great.
And I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. Is my feeling has always been, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here, is that the realtor is much more valuable to the seller than the buyer. And the reason for that is the realtors. I mean, you've walked into our house. We know each other very well, and you're looking at our house with a critical eye that the seller doesn't. They're too emotionally attached to it. Where the seller's agent can come in and say, hey, yeah, I know that you love this, and this about your house, but I'm telling you, the buyers that are out there right now don't like it. Or I know you think you're going to get this price for the house because of the comps from the brand new build that happened,
Right.
down the street. But guess what? Your house is 35 years old, so you're just not going to get a comp on that.
Right.
Do you think that's accurate? Whereas the buyer, I think you're almost more just kind of, you're taking them around, listening to them, hopefully finding out what their wants and needs are and aligning them and matching them up with a good property. I feel like the real impact of what you do as a business is probably more on the sell side. Is that correct or no?
I do. Yeah, I think you do a lot more work as a listing agent. But I've had buyers that I've driven around all over town for almost a year, and you work really hard for them, and you might be putting in contracts and doing I've done a lot of land research, flood research for people. I mean, it just depends on that. Then you can get a buyer that you find a house for immediately, and there's not a whole lot that you do there, but it just depends on every scenario.
Got it. Now, what's
I think
happening?
it's important, sorry, I will say, as a buyer's agent, especially if they're here in Arizona, we have so many that come from out of state that you end up educating your buyer on a lot just about the neighborhoods in the area. And it's very important to have somebody that can kind of guide you when you don't know the areas.
Well, I think that's vitally important. I recall once I first moved out here, it was shortly after I married my wife, but we took a ride. Like we are just out for a ride one day and went way out to the West Valley. And there's a really nice community out there. I won't necessarily name it because I don't know what's happening out there now, but it was built pre-Great Recession, and the idea was it was going to be a magnet for a lot of high-end real estate, a lot of wealthy people coming in, and they were beautiful homes. But when they built it, there was nothing else out there. And we took a ride out there just to see what was going on. Literally, there was this young family that had moved in from like Illinois or something like that with young kids that did not realize it because they basically bought the home, pre crash, sight unseen, did
Yeah.
not realize like they were way away from absolutely everything. It was like they were
Yeah.
just shocked that other human beings had showed up. And so, yeah, to your point, I think if you're coming in from out of state, you do not know what the area is and what the neighborhood is that best suits your need. Because here we've got some very diverse markets here in the valley for sure.
Yeah. There's a
So,
lot of expansion happening out west now too.
oh,
Buckeye,
yeah.
big Buckeye is going to expand a lot, and yeah.
So what's the hot market? Where are you showing most of your houses these days? I know you guys are up in Silverleaf, which for listeners that might be out not local or not familiar with it, do you want to talk a little bit about that community?
Yeah. Well, Silverleaf is a very high-end golf community, and that's where our company kind of originated, Silverleaf Realty. But we're everywhere in the valley now. But Silverleaf DC Ranch, a lot of North Scottsdale, when you get visitors that come in from out of state, they really want something that says Arizona. They want to be hiking, golfing, and that exists mainly up North Scottsdale. Um, but then we've got a lot of people. Paradise Valley is huge. That's probably the highest per foot price per foot. Well, maybe not. I shouldn't quote that, but one of the highest end communities
Yeah,
in the
now what we've seen, it's been interesting to me because the neighborhood that we live in on Arcadia, and when we bought our house in 2016, your price differential between Arcadia and Paradise Valley was not that great. There was a lot of, there's always demand for Arcadia, but there's a lot of demand for Arcadia. But Paradise Valley, it wasn't what it is today. I mean, can you
right.
talk a little bit about what has happened there? Because you drive through that community and literally, they're big lots, which is obviously a really nice thing, but all these houses have been scraped. And you're talking, these are, I don't even know what the average price point is in Paradise Valley, but it just seems to me like it's a very, um, if there's a single market where you just are seeing an enormous amount of money flooding into, from the outside looking in, it'll be PV. Am I right with that?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, PV is popular because it's all, mostly 1 acre lots, big, beautiful homes. It's conveniently centrally located. Um, and a lot of people moved to PV during COVID. And there's been a lot of just kind of taking up some of those older homes and those big lots, and a lot of builders building new spec homes for people coming in. It became a hot spot during COVID. And there was an article written up in Wall Street Journal about just this wonderful Paradise Valley. And I think that kind of escalated things as well a few years ago. And so a lot of what we are seeing mostly is North Scottsdale, Paradise Valley, Arcadia.
So what are we talking? Just rough estimates. What's the price points like average sales up in DC Ranch or Silverleaf and Paradise Valley and Arcadia right now?
I mean, you have stuff from 5 million to 30 million.
Yeah.
It's, um, I do have a number here from the Phoenix Business Journal that our number of closed sales above 5 million has grown more than 500% since 2019.
Wow. Wow. And
So,
PV, is that where are we at there versus Silverleaf? Are they kind of neck and neck in terms of sales prices, or is there a difference?
yeah, I think PV is a little higher.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I shouldn't say specifically when we compare North Scottsdale to PV, and that
Right.
includes all of North Scottsdale, not or actually all of Scottsdale. So, um,
Now you guys are not necessarily working with this buyer, but let's take it down market a little bit. Can you talk about what's happening sort of for I guess everybody else, for lack of a better term? Obviously you're dealing in the extremely ultra, you know, ultra luxury markets here in the valley. If you're a young couple starting out or you're a middle class family moving into Arizona, what part of the valley are you looking at?
I recommend Gilbert. A lot of families are looking Chandler, Gilbert, um, kind of mostly those two areas. Gilbert has really changed. Its whole downtown area is fantastic. Those areas both have a lot of family-friendly resources. Um, but Chandler is the price points down there are much better than, parts of North Scottsdale. You could even look if you wanted to still be in, depending on where you need to be for work. There are parts like yeah, I guess McCormick Ranch, that's pretty high priced too now, but you can still find some things there depending. It's going to be probably over $1 million. A lot of the homes, depending on your size you need, or if you want to have it remodeled, or but still parts of kind of the East Valley, I guess I would say.
And how's the inventory down in that part of the valley?
That I could not say.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know. I haven't followed it.
Yeah. Oh, I think I read something this morning that total sales last year were the units wise for the valley anyway were down in 2024 versus 2023, just again because there's just not, there's not the inventory. And if you're, 80, I
Yeah.
think about 85% of all the current homeowners that hold a mortgage are holding a mortgage at something with a 4 in front of it, you know. And if you're
Right.
moving now, you're looking at something with a 7 in front of it, and that really impacts affordability. Um, Let me end with this. So, you've shared a real wealth of obviously what's happening, particularly in the luxury market here in Arizona. Now, you started working for Silverleaf in 2021, and you took a hiatus away from business for a while after you had your 2 kids. And I think that particularly some of the women that might be listening might be really curious about what it was like re-entering the workforce after being out of it for a while.
Yeah, it was interesting. I I never thought I would not go back to work. And we had some things happen in our lives that kind of changed that. And I thought I'll just be at home with my kids for the rest of my life, I guess, or until they're grown. And but I got this opportunity. Kind of, I had been with Silverleaf in another role about 18 years ago, and um, somehow this opportunity came up, and I was able to take it very slow. Just kind of getting your brain back into that world, into like back relearning some of the new computer software that's come out since I was working before. Um, and I would say I told them I was going to start very slow. And so I took my time with it, and then each year just kind of increased and increased. And I have a great balance now of family and work, and I'm so pleased uh, with the opportunity.
What was the biggest challenge for you re-entering the workforce?
Balancing home and, I think for a lot of women, it's not doing good enough at home and not doing good enough at your job, not being able to split your time mentally, even just speaking to people and not speaking to a child, using real words. It took a while, but then it just sort of, you have to give it time. And I think a lot of people expect that to come back right away, and it doesn't necessarily, and you just take your time and then know that it'll come. And it was definitely, I'm so happy I made the decision.
Now, how long do you think that transition took before when you started to when you're now heading into the office and you're like, I got this, I know what I'm doing.
I would say it took a couple years.
Really? Wow.
The
Okay.
first year I went, like I said, I was like 2 days a week, kind of trying to just get my feet wet. And then took on kind of another role with the company in addition to just sales. So I think that kind of threw me in even deeper, and kind of brought me around even more in that second year.
Yeah. Well, I think that to your point, you've now had an opportunity, you got a couple years under your belt, more than that, about 4 years now, to ramp up for what I believe as well is going to be a pretty good 2025. I think that there's this the demand remains absolutely incredible. I think that we are economically and even from a lifestyle perspective in an absolute sweet spot here in Arizona. And and you hope that some things loosen up in terms of cost and everything else, and we get the building to catch up with what with what the demand seems to be. So I agree with you. I think it's going to be a real exciting year in real estate here in the valley, and
Yeah.
I know you're going to have a fantastic year. And so thank you for coming in and sharing your expertise and talking to us about it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting conversation. And speaking as someone who lives outside of the Arizona region of the country, I was intrigued listening to it. But I also couldn't help but think, the real estate market is really complex. So it's kind of hard to disrupt it. I mean, I was intrigued by the decision by the Supreme Court to say, yeah, no, you can negotiate those
Right.
percentages.
Right.
And I thought, wow, that's a huge, huge change. So it was interesting getting your reaction to that. I'm curious, given the economic base that Brent sort of painted for the area, and given the problems on the West Coast and issues in California, to what extent do you feel, do you anticipate, do you think maybe you could see an influx of people from the Golden State coming your way as a result of a whole variety of issues?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it already since even before these fires, during COVID, a lot of it. People just kind of fed up with the way with taxes and costs there, and the way things maybe it was politics. So it's been happening for quite a while, but I would expect to see more once they kind of the dust settles and they figure out what their move is going to be. I think especially for families right now, they're just thinking about, okay, let's just get through this second semester of school, and then we need to really figure out where we're going to settle our family. So I think it'll be, Phoenix is a great spot for them to come, or I'm sure other parts of the West will start to get infiltrated as well.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because I'm a big fan of California. I absolutely love it. I love going there to visit.
Yeah.
I think it's truly the most beautiful state in the entire country, with more natural gifts and attributes than any other place on the planet. And I think that's long term, I'm bullish on California, but I think at some point some point things are going to get a little bit worse before they get better. And capital goes where it's treated best. And Arizona is an amazing, beautiful, wonderful place, and we've got beautiful landscapes and great weather. But we're not San Diego, and we're not Big Sur. We're not some of these absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. Our mountains are not the Sierra Nevada. And the reason people are moving here is because it is beautiful, and you got no winters essentially, and you've got a great lifestyle. But we treat capital way better here. And
And
California, it's an abusive relationship with anybody there that has money, and that's just the facts. I mean, I've got clients that have left and pull up their stakes and taken their businesses out of California because they got tired of being taxed up the nose. They got tired of being treated like dirt by the state. They got tired of the abuse that they were taking as the productive people in the state that were paying all the bills. Now, I do think that I think what's happened, and not just with these wildfires, but in California, has been absolutely tragic. But I think you're getting people now to wake up and recognize that the path that this state has been on now, really for the last probably in earnest about 20 years or so, it's not sustainable. It's just not. You cannot treat the most productive people in your society like absolute garbage and tell them that they are all the sources of problems in the state and expect them to stay and take it. They're just not going to. Or if they do stay and they're paying 13-14% in taxes locally into the state and everything else, then they expect there to be water in the hydrants when there's a fire. They expect the reservoirs to be filled. They expect to have a higher status with the state than the Delta smelt. And I think that people are mad, and I hope they get mad, because California is a wonderful place, and I think it's good for the country if it reverses course and gets back on track. But in the meantime, it's going to lead. I think it's going to be a massive influx here at Arizona, because you've seen it. To Caroline's point, you've seen it over the last several years anyway, and you've seen people that are leaving California, and they're planting a flag here, and it's added tremendously to the value of what we're building here in Arizona. So I'm grateful for that as well.
That's terrific. That is terrific. Well, let's type a little bit of business here before we wrap this episode up. And the first one I want to start with is, Caroline, with you, in terms of if anybody's listening to this podcast thinking that they might want to give you a phone call, reach out to you to talk to you about real estate, what is the best way for them to contact you?
Phone or email, text. Do you want me to give that out?
Yeah, my website, phone number, all those.
Yeah, silverleafrealty.com. Caroline, no, I'm sorry, no, it's C Van Arsdale at silverleaf.com.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. And that will be in the show notes, so that if people are curious and they're out doing something and they can't write it down, they can look in the show notes and grab it from there. And Brent, as always, as we get ready to say goodbye, I like, throwing the same question at you all of the time. If people are listening and they want to get a hold of you, how do they do it?
Yeah, website is tws.finance, and that has pretty much every conceivable way to reach us. Phone number in here is 602-255-0555. And a member of my team will be able to track me down. And social media, really active on LinkedIn. You message me on LinkedIn, it's me on the other side of it, and always happy to answer any of your questions.
Yes, and I can testify to that because I communicate with Brent on LinkedIn all the time.
All the time.
It is actually him. He's
is
actually
big.
there.
Good job, guys.
That's good. So, and also, I want to remind you, if you're listening to this podcast, you came across it and you never listened before, you've only listened a couple of times and you're not a subscriber, become a subscriber. That's easy. Just hit the follow button. That way, every time a new episode of the podcast drops, you're notified and you can give it a listen. The other thing I would ask on the way out is if you find this information useful, if you find the podcast helpful, if you enjoy it, tell people about it. Refer a friend, as it were. Word of mouth promotion is a tremendous tool, and we would very much appreciate it. Until next time, I'm Bill Tucker on behalf of Brent and everybody at TWS. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen today. And I will remind you that you can go out today and make today a great day. Or not. It's your choice. Use it wisely. Until next time.